thank everyone for coming out here tonight. I'd like to thank Dr. Clean for volunteering this evening to be here. And I would submit to you that there are four basic principles of reasoning. The first principle says use systematic doubt and question everything. The second says learn the difference between truth and persuasion. The third says be precise in your use of words and expect the same of others. And the fourth says learn to recognize error in all things. If we are to accept these principles, we are then placed into the uncomfortable position of having to examine our beliefs and facing the possibility that we may be wrong. And this is why I've asked Dr. Clinton to come here this evening. During his presentation, I would like for you to consider this following question. What evidence would it take to show that your beliefs are wrong? If we are to consider ourselves free thinkers, we have an obligation to answer this question. To do so otherwise is moral cowardice and intellectual laziness.
The whole point was we didn't have any beliefs.
We did. Okay, so you're free, Dr. Clinton, to go on.
Okay, well, do I have to live up to those four principles? Except for the error part, I'm good at the error. Daniel and I have been talking about becoming for a while, and thought that we actually talked about this a year ago, actually.
It was in the spring.
It was a while ago.
It was a while ago.
Spring. To me, there's only yesterday, today, tomorrow. Lower your expectations, by the way. You'll be a lot happier if you do. I thought what I would do when we first talked was to talk about the most powerful argument or arguments in favor of the existence of God. And just by chance, about 3 weeks ago, Nick Jones, my colleague, who I guess has already spoke to you, handed me this book that he'd just gotten. And it's a book in the philosophy of religion by a guy named Mark Johnston. And he says, you know, this is a pretty good book. You should take a look at it. And I go, yeah. People are always giving me books to look at. I go, yeah. Put them on the stack. Give them back in a year or so. And they say, hey, have you ever finished that book? Yeah. And I didn't think I would look at it. So I took it home with me and I started flipping through it. And it's absolutely brilliant. I mean, it's one of the most exciting philosophy books I've read like ever. So I ordered a copy and it just came today. Right? So it's still with the Amazon rack. You don't open it up yet. So this gave me a lot of ideas about things to talk about. So anything that's really good, I probably swiped from Johnston. But what I thought I would do is talk about why you should believe in God. Trying to sound a little bit more persuasive and a little bit less corny. But what are the strongest considerations, as far as I can tell, in favor of the existence of God, or at least for believing that there's a God? First of all, I'm not too sure that evidence is going to be much help to us. Sorry to be violating one of the first principles right away.
What kind of evidence are you referring to?
Huh?
What kind of evidence are you referring to?
Any kind, because here's what I do. What counts as evidence is going to be something that is going to vary depending upon the overall view you take of things. So the sort of thing that one person takes to be evidence or something is going to be very different from the sort of thing another person takes to be evidence. And whether there's really such a thing as objective evidence sort of irrelevant here, since we're talking about the kind of evidence that might persuade somebody. And so persuasive power has got to play a role here. And I don't think anybody ever changed his or her mind about whether God exists or not on the basis of a particular argument, which is not the same as saying that reason doesn't play a role in religion and thinking about religion and thinking about religious commitment. But I don't think that arguments for the existence of God have ever brought about anybody's conversion from a religious point of view to a non-religious point of view, or from a non-religious point of view to a religious point of view. Rather, it seems to me there are ways of looking at things that, you realize this sounds all mushy and imprecise, I'm going to violate every single one of Daniel's 4 principles in the first 5 minutes. Which doesn't show that you're wrong, it just shows that you guys should be more careful.
We should have collaborated beforehand, shouldn't we?
But anyway, it seems to me that really does very, very mushy, but you find a way of looking at the world that sort of fits. I don't know how to explain it more than that. There's a way of looking at the world that fits, and when you find that way that fits, that's the way that's going to help you to make sense out of things. And realize we're off to an extremely bad start here. So let me try to talk more specifically about the advantages of a theistic orientation, the belief in the existence of God. What are some of the advantages of believing that God exists? Well, it seems to me there are advantages in all of the major areas of philosophical inquiry. And here I can sort of wheel out some big words so we can at least learn something tonight. There are metaphysical advantages. Metaphysics is the study of what exists or is real. There are epistemological advantages. Advantages having to do with questions about the nature and extent of knowledge. And then there are, here's a really big word that you probably don't know, axiological advantages. That is, advantages having to do with what's valuable or what's worth doing or what's worth believing or what's worth thinking, this kind of thing. And it seems to me that the most important of these is the axiological. And so maybe we better start there. A religious point of view is motivated by the idea that we're really screwed up. That human beings are so fundamentally and catastrophically damaged that it requires something supernatural to provide for our salvation. That is, to provide for a kind of reorientation of the way in which we think and feel and act. We're just fundamentally, by our very nature, somehow corrupt. And why would you think that? Now, one reason you might think that is because you've been told that. You've been told that sort of thing. I remember when I would go to church with my parents, and we would recite the creed and all of the things that we said in church. And there was one line in particular that struck me that we had to say in the confession of sins part of the service, that I'm a poor, wretched sinner. And I remember thinking that sounded pretty strong. Great, I didn't feel that wretched. But somehow, in the religious point of view, it seems to me you've got to buy into something like that. How can we come to feel that and not just be told that? One way to think about it is this. It's part of our nature. It's part of the way we're put together. It's part of human nature to be unbelievably inclined towards selfishness. Right? Whether we like it or not, we're really inclined to be selfish. And selfishness is, in one way, sort of the polar opposite of what morality requires of us. Because morality requires of us that we give some consideration to the interests of others. Exactly how much consideration we have to give to the interests of others is a very vexed issue. But to be moral, we have to give at least some consideration to the interests of others. And we're so put together that this is very difficult for us. It's very difficult for us on our own to transform our wills in such a way that we're able to give the appropriate kind of consideration to the welfare of others. And I'm really stealing this from Jonathan directly. It's just such a wonderful image. When it comes to balancing the scales of right and wrong, we always have the finger on our own side. Right? We always want things to come on our own side. And so one thing that we might want from religion, and we might want from anything that deserves to be worshipped, is a kind of power that we don't have to transform our wills in such a way that we, at least some of the time, aren't so nastily selfish. Okay? So there's a promise in religion of a certain kind of transformation of the self that, at least from a religious point of view, is not something that we're going to be able to work up on our own. It really